Rachel Reeves now, morning Chancellor. I don't know
Hi there.
if you could hear what
Special,
was being said a moment
important
ago. It was Joe
interview
who
with
asked you
Rachel
very
Reeves,
directly that
Chancellor of
question.
England.
Why not a wealth tax or increase
Spring
wealth
budget.
tax? Why are you hitting
UK
the poor and
25.
the disadvantaged?
In the budget last
Cardiff,
year, we
live.
significantly increased taxes,
25 minutes to 8
including on
a.m.
the
in the morning.
wealthy.
It doesn't
We got
help.
rid of the non-dom tax status because it's a basic principle of mine that if you make Britain your home, you should pay your taxes here. We put VAT on private school fees, we increased capital gains tax, and we
27th
also
of March,
tightened up
sorry.
the rules around
25,
inheritance
yeah,
tax. So we
25.
did a number of things in the budget last year to ask those with the broadest shoulders to pay more. And yesterday we set out reforms to the welfare state, because I don't think there's anybody that thinks that the welfare system is working today. It's not providing sufficient support for those who need it most, it's not encouraging people back into work, and it's increasingly unsustainable for the long term. 1 in 8 young people today are not in education, employment or training. As a Labour government, as a Labour Chancellor, I'm not willing to write off a generation of young people. I want those young people to have the opportunities that they deserve to get skilled up, to do the jobs of the future. That's why we're announcing more construction skills places. That's why we're announcing more apprenticeships. That's why we're increasing the national living wage and the national minimum wage for younger workers, to make sure that work pays and to give people the personalised, tailored support to get back into work. And that's what this government are determined to do, to lift people out of poverty and ensure that more people have the chance to realise their dreams and ambitions.
Please, Sky
You
Michelle,
say
sign
that's your
agendas.
determination, but on your own impact assessments, you say that 250,000 people will be put in relative poverty by 2029, 50,000 of those children. Those are your own figures.
That's scary.
Charlie, those figures are based on no changes in terms of people going back into work. And we know that the £1 billion that we put in yesterday to personalised, tailored support to support people back into work will make a difference. So we're going to work with the Office of Budget Responsibility, the official forecaster, over the summer, ahead of the budget in the autumn, to show how those plans can make a difference. But I was in my own constituency job centre last week in Pudsey in Leeds, and I met with the work coaches there, and they are doing extraordinary things to help people with real challenges in their lives get into work, and they told me about the difference that that is making. And if we can turbocharge that, we don't have to have 1 in 8 young people not in education, employment or training. We don't have to see 1,000 people a day start to claim personal independence payments. There must always be support there for the most sick and disabled, absolutely. But there are many people today who are trapped on benefits who, with the proper support, could be back in the workplace. And that's what I want to see for more people in our country.
What's your evidence for what you've just said? Above and beyond the anecdotal, you went into a work centre. But what is the evidence that the money that you will put in will do what you say it will and take people out of welfare? Because it is possible, I put it to you, that it won't work the way you intend it to. And the reality will be, just as the OBR have said, that 250,000 people will go into poverty. That is a possibility.
Well, if you look at what the last Labour government did with the New Deal to get people back to work, and specifically the New Deal for disabled people, that had a big impact. If you look at schemes like Access to Work to help disabled people back into work. So there's lots of evidence that when governments actually try to support people back into work, rather than just writing them off and leaving them on benefits with no support, that we can make a difference. And we know that as people move from welfare to work, they are twice as likely to come out of poverty, and that's what I want for more people. We're increasing the national living wage to make sure that work pays. The Employment Rights Bill offers more security and dignity from work, and there's tailored support. The evidence from previous schemes is that it can make a material difference in getting people back to work, and we now need to work to make sure that that happens, because I don't want anyone to be denied the opportunities that I believe are their right to work, to make a contribution for their family incomes, and that we can lift people out of poverty by enabling people to fulfill their potential.
One of the problems we have here is that some of the things you thought were going to happen are not happening. On growth specifically, and very importantly, that the growth prediction now reduced from 2% to 1%. On that,
oh dear,
it's gone wrong. That growth is not happening. And a lot of what you predicated in terms of what you're planning for the country was based on growth. That is now gone, and it's going down.
It's slowing down.
Inflation as well. And later this year, expected to go up again. Many things, frankly, are not working out the way they said you would, so people have less faith in what you're saying will happen next.
Well, the world is changing, and we can see that
Donald Trump
hasn't
helped, I guess.
That has put pressure on the UK economy and the global economy these last few months. But we're stepping up to those challenges, spending more on defence, continuing to meet the fiscal rules to provide the economic stability. But since Labour were elected in July, the Bank of England have had the confidence to cut interest rates 3 times. That's a huge change from the last Parliament, when interest rates, mortgage rates, borrowing costs for businesses and families went up and up and up. The data on inflation yesterday showed that inflation came down. For the last few months, wages have been rising at around twice the rate of inflation. So our plan for change is beginning to work. I recognise that it takes time after the cost of living crisis people have gone through the last few years for people to feel better off. We need to do more. That's why next week 3 million people on the national living wage will get a pay rise worth around £1,400 a year if you work full-time, putting more money in the pockets of people on the lowest incomes in our country, and we'll continue those efforts to ensure that working people are better off.
Okay, let me try, if I may, Rachel Reeves. Can I just...
Well, let me just give you this one number, because just going to say that the Office of Budget Responsibility are forecasting that compared to the plans we inherited, people are going to be on average £500 better off by the end of this Parliament. But of course I want to do more, to put more money in people's pockets.
Paul Johnson from the IFS called that £500 figure feeble. That was the words he used this morning in relation to that period of time and that success. Can I also, so let's break down that when people will feel better date, if you like. So help me with this one. By the end of this year, for example, are people going with your £500 figure? Are they going to be worse off or better off by the end of this year? I'm suggesting to you that what you're really telling people is that it's going to be worse for a while, and then right at the end, it'll feel a bit better.
Well, again, if you look at the official forecaster, they say that in every year in this Parliament, real household disposable income per person is going to rise. Of course, that's an average, but for the last few months, we've had wage growth of just under 6%, and we've had inflation, well, the most recent numbers at 2.8%. So wages are rising at about twice the rate of inflation at the moment. That is a far cry from the last Parliament, of course, when inflation hit 11%, and interest rates have come down now 3 times, and the Bank of England have been able to do that because of the stability we've returned to the economy. But I recognise that the cost of living crisis is continuing to bite. I'm not complacent about family finances. Every day in my job, I am focused on how we can grow the economy to make working people better off. We are doing more. Our pensions reform, our planning reform, our regulatory reform is all about growing our economy to put more money in people's pockets.
Chancellor, I need to ask you about what happened overnight, the decision by Donald Trump to bring in tariffs. This is in relation to cars coming into the US. 25% tariffs. That was after your spring statement. We know next week Donald Trump is to bring in further tariff announcements. How concerned are you about the very real possibility that international tariffs could completely upend all your predictions and plans?
There we go. This is what is worrying for her.
I believe in free and open trade. I believe that is good for countries around the world. The United States are concerned about countries that run persistent large surpluses with them. The UK is not one of those countries, and that's why we are in extensive talks right now with the US ahead of those increases in tariffs next week. So, but
can I just interrupt so that
we're
people
in those
fully understand?
Conversations at the moment.
Rachel Reeves, can I just, so people understand, you say the UK is not affected. The announcement made overnight does affect the UK. We're not excluded from that.
Of course we're not.
It's all cars from all over the world, which would include cars from Land Rover, Jaguar Land Rover, and vehicles coming. So we are involved. We're not excluded from this.
No, absolutely. No, the point I was making, Charlie, is that the US are particularly concerned about countries that run those big surpluses with them. That's why we are in talks with the US at the moment to try and carve out a deal for the UK. We've still got a few days of those talks to go. Recognise it's a really important time, especially for those who do export to the US, whether it's cars or steel or so many other goods and services. But our economies are so closely intertwined. There are 1 million British people working for American firms and 1 million Americans working for British firms. So an escalation of tariffs would be bad for the UK, but it'd be bad for the US as well. And that's why we are working intensely these next few days to try and secure a good deal for Britain. I recognise how important this is.
Rachel Reeves, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's the Chancellor. Hands up the right side screen.
How much are people convinced by the Chancellor's vision? Ben is in Sheffield this morning asking what people make of what she's had to say. Ben?
Yes, Joe put that very first question to the Chancellor. Why not a wealth tax rather than targeting savings from people who are less well off? Joe, what did you make of the Chancellor's answer saying she introduced tax rises on the wealthy in the budget in the autumn?
Yeah, no, I feel that she's just reiterating what she said every time this question is put to her. It's the same, we put school fees up, etc., etc., etc. But basically, the people that she's really hitting are not the very wealthy. And as you know, there are the group of millionaires who are actually saying, let us pay more. But she is not getting to the root of the problem. She's got the stock answers. I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. Get rid of the question. We'll go on to the next one. And that is so wrong. They've got to find a different way of looking at the lack of any kind of equality in this society. And I feel that very much that they are handling the problems wrongly. I know things need to be trimmed, but this is being handled wrongly.
You sound very angry about it.
I am actually. I'm fairly angry. I'm a strong Labour supporter, or I was. I have been all my life. But what they are doing, they made the mistake at the very beginning with the way that they dealt with the winter fuel payment. Because it needed trimming. I absolutely agree that people shouldn't get it who don't need it. But it could have been done in a much more sensitive way.
Okay, Neil, what was your takeaway from the Chancellor's interview?
Well, I see her standing in front of a building site and making a promise of 1 million plus houses during the term of this government.
Not going to happen.
But they're already admitting that they're going to fall short, and I'd want to know why, after 9 months of government, they're already failing targets.
Okay, thank you both for your thoughts and your reactions.
You can't keep their pledges, can they? You can't trust any politician. All the same.
Adam and Alan here on the sofa with us. Alan, first to you, as a Professor of Employment Policy, we know about the Chancellor's aim of getting young people.
Well, you get a dictator in charge.
She's worried about people trapped on benefits. There's this £1 billion to help support people back into work. How will that work? What will that look like, do you think? Do we know yet?
Well, understandably, the focus of the reforms has been around the cuts to disability benefits. They won't help people move back into work. They're likely just to make them more unwell and more disengaged from work. But there were some really important announcements around supporting people with health conditions and disabilities back into work. Two main ones that I would focus on. So there was this promise of scaling up to £1 billion per annum by 2930 for employment support for people with health conditions and disabilities. That's really welcome. That kind of scale is really welcome. The important things around that we still need to know. There's lots of detail about that. We don't know the pace of that. The cuts are going to come before that. We really need to start to grow that as soon as possible. And also the nature of that provision. The evidence would strongly suggest we need voluntary, values-based, person-centred provision. But really welcome announcement to really offer that support.
Alan, just to bring you in, from UK hospitality, what role could the hospitality sector play given the pressures it's facing at the moment in terms of getting people back into work?
It's a really important question. Hospitality is one of very few sectors which provides routes into work for everyone, everywhere. You don't need a degree, you can work part-time. But the Chancellor's wrong to characterise the budget last year as being about the people with the broadest shoulders paying most. The most significant tax lever she pulled was employer NICs. And we know that the way that she did it means that the less you earn, the more you pay. So actually, the people who were most hit by the budget last year were the people who are maybe working part-time, maybe in their first job. And it is a situation where the people who are being asked to pay most to fix the problem we're in are the people who are most vulnerable.
Okay, thank you very
There you
much.
go, guys.
Thank you to you both.
Put your thumbs up the right side of the screen. Scratch on signage.
Morning, as you can see.